German, Spencer Davies. If you're seeing us together, Spencer Squared, it can only mean one thing, Spence. Cavalier season is just around the corner. That's right.
Absolutely, baby. Season 2 of Spencer Squared coming at you soon. Right now, actually.
We are very much looking forward to it. Reason we're with you today, we had a chance to hear from, obviously, President of Basketball Operations and new head coach, Kenny Atkinson, as they get ready for Media Day. The official Media Day is Monday, but we talked to them sort of in advance here. And our first chance really talking to both of those gentlemen in quite some time. Last time I had a chance to really connect with them was back when Kenny Atkinson was hired in early July. And now it's a couple months later and the season's getting going. And we know there's a lot of obviously storylines covering this team as they've brought a lot of guys back. They talked a lot about continuity being a big thing. Just maybe start with Spence, maybe your biggest takeaway from what was said by both Koby Altman and Kenny Atkinson today as they get started on thinking ahead to the season.
They just believe in the core four, and that's why they wrapped all of them up in contracts for the next 4 or 5 years. They've just got this unbelievable sense of togetherness, and the fact that everything is internal and the improvement's going to come from within the building, I think speaks to how much they believe in this core four. Obviously, the surrounding pieces are going to be important, but these guys truly have backed every single one of that quartet.
Yeah.
And it's come in extensions, as you saw with Evan Mobley and Jared Allen and Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland got taken care of last year. It's a big part of it. They want to keep these guys together for a long time. And who knows if it doesn't work out in the first, half season, whatever. We'll figure that out from now. But Kenny Atkinson seems very excited about this roster. Koby keeps going back to the same quote all the time. You don't fluke your way into the seasons that they've had. You don't fluke your way into 99 wins as this core has achieved together during the regular season. And while I understand why some fans are saying, okay, we'll prove it to the playoffs, and they need to, I think that their benchmark has to be the Eastern Conference Finals this year, personally. But it does mean something. And that's big time for why they kept these guys together. And we'll see what it looks like with a new tactician and some new offensive concepts.
Yeah, I thought Koby had an interesting quote where he said, the easy thing to do is move on, try something different. There's some truth in that. Now, I push back on that a little bit because I do think it's hard sometimes for organizations to move on from guys that are homegrown players that you drafted that you feel really good about. So I do think on some level, that is still a hard thing to decide to do. But I see where he's coming from in that, you look around the league, teams are always tweaking and swapping guys in and out. The Celtics just did that last year, getting Marcus Smart out of there, and then they go win a championship. So, there's something to be said for that. But I understand Cavs fans want to see some changes this offseason. There was a lot of clamoring for that. There's a lot of talk about that. I do think there's something to be said, though, for, and Koby Altman kind of used the term runway, giving this group a longer
It's his favorite
runway.
word.
Yeah. And I think there's something to be said for, all right, you got a new coach in here. A tactician is the word that you use. I think that's a really good word for it in Kenny Atkinson. And seeing if he can take this team to the next level before you then decide, okay, now it's time to start tweaking things. So as much as Cavs fans maybe wanted some changes, I am excited to see what this group that we've all kind of gotten to know and watch over the last couple of years can do with a different sort of voice and a different sort of strategy to how they're going to be utilized.
We touched on it a little bit when Kenny was first hired here and he had his press conference with Koby in the first go round. It's going to be a lot faster. It's going to be more movement in the half court. And something that he actually went to today in this press conference that kind of caught my ear was being 23rd in the NBA last year in corner transition threes. That's interesting to me because those are the quickest shots you can get. And he said that in the vein of getting Donovan those shots, getting Darius those shots, whoever's down the floor. You know that Max Strus can shoot the heck out of the basketball. You know that George Niang, over his career, has been a good
Maybe
three-point
not in
shooter.
the playoffs this past year, but yes, over the course of his career.
Well, exactly. That's the things that they're going to be trying to remedy.
Yeah.
Sam Merrill, as we've seen, is very much so a weapon coming off of screens and snaking through the half court. Darius Garland, what I asked Kenny Atkinson about, how do you get such an unselfish guy to be a little more selfish, to be somebody who's aggressive in taking his shots? He simply said, you could take those shots as long as they're coming within the flow of the offense and that he's able to kind of generate his own, right? And he's coached guys like Steph Curry, and he's seen him up close and personally. They were talking about The Olympics this summer, which was
he was on the losing end of that game.
There were some funny quotes there, but ultimately it's just going to be a team effort, and it's going to be all these guys have to contribute in that core four and the guys around them, and that's the stick of it.
Well, we know the team very much stayed the same. One thing that also stayed the same in terms of what was talked about today, Kenny Atkinson is gung-ho about the opportunity to help develop Evan Mobley and help him take that next step. He shined some more light on what that looks like, talked about using him in the half court and the ball really going through him, which is something that Cavs fans have also sort of hoped to see more of. And I think that's also a trend around the NBA is big men doing more with the ball in their hands. Just what did you take away from what he had to say in his latest commentary, I guess, on Evan Mobley and how you're expecting to see him utilized in this Cavaliers offense?
I loved how he broke it down into parts and didn't kind of give us the coach speak. I know sometimes coaches can be a little bit gun shy.
4 or 5 points.
He could be a little gun shy as far as some coaches in the league of just, which way they want to go. He went out and said, okay, it starts with his usage. That's the first thing. He's going to have the ball in his hands more. Then you look at rebound and run. Okay, that's what's going to be Evan getting speed coming down the floor and making sure that he can attack the rim from there. And then you look in the half court as a playmaker, running dribble handoffs, running, guys coming off of screens and being able to kind of facilitate from that nail, from that face-up position. That's very important for Evan Mobley's development. You look at the strength object of it, right? He has to get a little bit more pounds on. He's added them over time, 15, 20 pounds since he's been drafted. Still got a little bit more to go there. He wants to see him on the offensive glass. That's another part that Kenny mentioned during this press conference. And ultimately, there was another part of this, but everyone talks about Evan Mobley needs to be a three-point shooter. A reporter asked him about Brook Lopez and how Brook went from, a guy who's maintained himself in the post and stretching out to the perimeter. He goes, I don't think he's going to go from 0 to 9 like Brook did a game, but being able to take those shots, being in comfortable positions to take those shots, and having the confidence to take those shots.
Yeah, and that's, I think, one of the biggest things fans are obviously looking for is him doing more of that. And I'm fascinated by it because for whatever reason, Kenny has been sort of the creator of
he's the guru.
These big men, turning them into 3-point shooters. And so if he can do that with Evan Mobley, that brings an element to his game. I'm curious on Monday when we have media day with the players to hear how Evan Mobley sort of talks about how he's embracing this role. Because you hear Kenny talk about it and it's like your ears perk up. We're all excited. We're like, okay, him being more of a facilitator, him having a bigger role in the offense. What does that look like from Evan Mobley's side of it? Because he's got to really welcome that and embrace that. And I'm sure he will, but I'm curious to kind of hear what he has to say about it. Another thing that I thought stood out, Koby talked a lot about just the retention of guys this offseason, and most notably Donovan Mitchell, and sort of the monumental sign of like what that meant for this organization to keep a star player here in town. And the line he used was that he quoted Dan Gilbert, obviously owner of the team, and he said, even though people think we're a small market or a mid-market team, we're not a mid-market team in terms of our resources. I think you guys know that from what we saw Dan Gilbert do during the championship runs in the late 2016 or 20 teens, and the championship run in 2016 where they actually won it. He invested a lot in this team. He continues to invest a lot in this team. And that also kind of plays into Kobe's commentary on like the tax threshold and them operating in that
second apron stuff.
Right. Yep. Dan Gilbert's not afraid to kind of operate in that world, even though they have to be mindful of the restrictions that comes with as well.
100%. And I think speaking to the point of the retention of the players, just to reflect on what Kobe said, it's guys that want to be here.
Yeah.
It's guys that want to be here. Talked about Donovan Mitchell leading the charge after Labor Day. Guys were in the gym already, and he was the one that was kind of spearheading that. You look at Isaac Okoro coming back on a very, I think it's a solid deal for someone who's like, in 8th in your rotation, 9th in your rotation for a guy to be making $38 million over 3 years and 33 of that guaranteed. I think that's a decent deal for a guy that's in his position.
Well, clearly they waited at the market on that.
Absolutely.
He sort of surveyed some things.
And he tested it out. He wanted to see what he could get.
And the Cavaliers were the end choice. And I like that Kobe kind of mentioned like he was still working out in Cavaliers gear, even though he was like surveying some other things. But that's another good point in terms of retention.
Absolutely. And then, Jared Allen gets his extension after his original extension with the Cavs when they first traded for him during the rebuild. And I loved how much that he talked about Jarrett and how important he was just in that part of their rebuild and that stage of this organization, just flipping things around. And you have the final piece. We talked about Donovan Mitchell. Darius Garland got a lot of love in this press conference.
Yeah.
He got a ton of love in this press conference. Koby went as far as to say that they don't appreciate him enough for how much he's endured, how much he helped change the culture, and he's the longest tenured Cav.
That is crazy.
Which kind of makes me feel old. I'm not going to lie. I've been around the squad for a while. This era now is apparently where Darius Garland is the longest tenured Cavs. So they've got a lot invested into this core four, and I'm really interested and excited, frankly, to see what a proven guy like Kenny Atkinson can do, just as far as his mind and what he's able to do with his development.
And we've certainly heard, Donovan Mitchell since signing talk about how much he loved in Cleveland. He had a comment recently about how he was already telling his teammates he was planning on staying in Cleveland.
January or February?
Yeah, so like that's pretty telling. I thought Kobe sort of alluding to the idea that he's been bought in day one, even though there was all this outside noise about him looking at his options. And that's not to say he didn't think about other options, but he's been all about Cleveland. He committed to them. He calls this place his home. All that stuff matters, and now that that's taken care of, and that's obviously the big thing from the offseason. You feel like you can take positive steps in the right direction moving forward. Whether that means the core four is here for the long term, or if they start making some tweaks at some point during the season, next offseason. But you at least got that core piece kind of at the forefront of it. Anything else, Spence, that stood out to you from the commentary today from either Koby Altman or Kenny Atkinson as we begin our media day coverage here on Friday and obviously finishing up on Monday?
I'm glad you asked. The depth piece is also something that Cavs fans will be music to their ears. Kenny Atkinson flat out came out and said, I'm going to play 10 guys, probably 11. So,
which is a change of pace from JB Bickerstaff. Obviously.
Right, exactly. And he had, 8 guys going out there and a lot of minutes on the starters. I'm thinking we're going to see a lot of Sam Merrill. I'm thinking we're going to see a lot of Isaac Okoro. Karis LeVert, he's happy to reconnect with him. I know a lot of people had him in trade rumors and whatnot. Seems like he's here. So make the best of it. You have guys off the bench like George Niang. Ty Jerome apparently has been the MVP of September, according to Koby Altman, just after missing 80 games last year. They signed him to be a backup guard, and he's one of those bigger guards. He's 6'5". He's able to play the right way. Came from a Virginia system with Tony Bennett and was a really solid player there and has made a decent career for himself in the NBA. They really like what he brings to the table. Hopefully he can get at least a shot to look at minutes here this year. And the depth is going to be a big part of what Kenny does. And he emphasized the importance of building those habits during the regular season. The regular season is important for teams, maybe not pundits and fans that look at it and say, okay, get me to April, but it's important to build the right habits and get there. And part of that is making sure that your depth is playing significant minutes and meaningful minutes in certain situations so that when the time comes in the postseason, they're ready for it.
I'm glad you brought up the depth because I do think if you were to make like a list of top 5 things you're most excited about with Kenny Atkinson being the head coach, I think obviously like the development of Evan Mobley's got to probably be one. Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, how those guys kind of play together. And then there's a number of other things. But I think in the top 5 somewhere has to be the depth piece because we've talked so much the last couple of years about how we thought this team was a deep team. And it just never really bared itself out with the way that obviously JB Bickerstaff did rotations and just all these different things. But to have that mind and Kenny Atkinson come in and see the same roster, but have a different angle or look at it or feel about it, I'm excited to see how he utilizes those guys in sort of the back end of the roster and how they kind of get reps and play and what that means for this team, hopefully come playoff time. So guys, we appreciate you following along as always. We have tons of stuff going up, obviously, at Cavaliers on SI. You can read about some of the stuff that was said today. Another thing that was brought up, Koby Altman talked about how they always had that championship mindset and how the next phase of this thing is winning multiple playoff series, and that's difficult to do. So you can see all that stuff at the Cavaliers on SI YouTube channel where you're probably watching this, but also over at Cavaliers on SI. Until next time, Spence and I will be back on Monday. We'll have more coverage for you from Media Day as the Cavaliers players now get to talk to us for the first time before they open up training camp as well. So we'll be back on that with more of that on Monday. But until then, we appreciate you guys watching and continue following along for all your Cleveland Cavaliers coverage at Cleveland Cavaliers on SI.